Imagine standing at the very center of the world's most powerful dynasty, only to find yourself completely locked out when the final storm hits. In the absolute dead of night, one of the most recognizable figures in modern history was left standing outside the palace gates with nowhere left to turn. For nearly 4 decades, she guarded the deepest secrets of the crown and stood unwavering through every single scandal. Yet, when the walls finally collapsed around her, the phones went silent, the grand doors were locked, and the people she protected simply vanished into thin air. But this isn't just a story about a family dispute. It is the unveiling of a decades-long debt that has finally come due. We are breaking down secret details, including a jaw-dropping revelation near the end of this video that changes everything you thought you knew about the palace inner circle. You definitely won't want to miss a single second of how this puzzle pieces together, so if you love deep, unfiltered dives into the world's most fascinating figures, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Because the truth is far more complicated than simple abandonment. The illusion of safety inside the royal circle can vanish in a single morning. For Sarah Ferguson, that moment arrived when the keys to her sanctuary were effectively taken away. Reports suggest that after 22 years of calling the massive royal lodge her home, the final notice arrived not with a grand announcement, but with a cold, quiet decree. Rumors indicate she was given a strict timeline to pack up decades of memories and vacate the premises for good. This wasn't just a simple relocation, it was a public displacement happening under the unforgiving lens of the global media. But the loss of her home was only the first domino to fall. As the moving trucks prepared to arrive, her entire independent empire began to fracture from the inside out. Insiders say that major corporate partnerships and charitable foundations bearing her name started quietly cutting ties, terrified of the escalating public scrutiny. The commercial safety net she had spent years building out of nothing was evaporating in a matter of weeks. She found herself moving between temporary wellness retreats in Europe, effectively cut off from the lifestyle she had known for 40 years. Yet, the timing of this sudden eviction reveals a much darker picture. This catastrophic collapse didn't happen in a vacuum. It unfolded precisely as new, intense waves of public controversy surrounded her former husband, ensuring that her name was dragged right back into the headlines alongside his. Every headline focused on her past, every camera tracked her movements, and the public speculation about her financial ruin reached an all-time high. She was facing the absolute lowest point of her life, completely exposed to the elements. And as the pressure reached a boiling point, people started noticing a chilling detail. The grand gates of the palace remained firmly shut, and not a single senior royal stood forward to offer a helping hand. If everything was collapsing around her so spectacularly, why was nobody standing beside her? Silence from the palace can be far more damaging than any public statement. When the absolute worst of the storm hit Sarah Ferguson, the institutional machinery did not move to protect her. Instead, King Charles III completely froze her out. Insiders say the command from the top was absolute: total distance, zero public association, and absolute silence. As the global media camped outside her door, King Charles and Queen Camilla carried on with their duties as if she simply did not exist. But this wasn't an accidental oversight. It was a highly calculated strategy. Reports suggest that the core focus of the institution had shifted entirely towards safeguarding the future line of succession for Prince William and Princess Catherine. With the crown navigating its most turbulent period in decades, senior members of the family realized that any association with past controversies could permanently damage their standing. The survival of the institution always comes first. According to sources, a deliberate boundary line was drawn, separating the active, serving royals from the heavy liabilities of the past. Yet, the true depth of this isolation was hidden in plain sight. Even during official family gatherings where appearances are everything, the distance between the core family and the House of York was unmistakable. It is claimed that behind the public smiles, the message to Sarah was loud and clear: you are on your own. The years she spent defending the family, the public loyalty she displayed, and the secrets she kept meant nothing when balanced against the survival of the crown. The palace walls are built to keep threats out, and right now her name was considered a direct threat to the family's image. The cold reality of her situation was finally setting in. She was left to navigate a massive public relations disaster without the shield of royal security or the backing of the palace press office. Every request for support was met with a wall of polite, unyielding silence from King Charles. The family had made their choice, leaving her completely exposed to the global media frenzy. It raises a haunting question about the true nature of her decades inside the inner circle. Was this crushing silence an intentional act of rejection, or simply an unavoidable consequence of the choices she made along the way? You cannot purchase true safety inside a dynasty, no matter the price you pay. For Sarah Ferguson, the ultimate cost of her decades-long arrangement became painfully clear the exact moment she realized her fiercest ally had completely run out of power. Reports suggest that for nearly 30 years, her entire strategy for survival relied on one unbreakable bond: her absolute, unyielding loyalty to Andrew. Even after their highly publicized 1996 divorce, they famously shared the same roof, presented a unified front, and navigated the worst media storms together. But clinging to the past eventually created a devastating trap. By constantly tying her public image to Andrew, Sarah was slowly burning the very bridges she would one day desperately need. Insiders say that as the heavy shadow of the Jeffrey Epstein controversy completely consumed Andrew's life, it quietly bled into hers as well. She wasn't just supporting an ex-husband, she was anchoring herself to a sinking ship. Potential business partners, high-profile media networks, and elite international allies began quietly backing away, terrified of the public fallout by association. Her loyalty didn't just protect Andrew, it slowly, systematically isolated her from the rest of the world. Yet she refused to walk away, believing the palace would always provide a safety net. That belief was shattered when the institutional walls finally collapsed. According to sources, when King Charles III officially stripped Andrew of his remaining royal titles and ordered the couple out of royal lodge, the protective bubble burst instantly. The unified front they had maintained for decades evaporated in a matter of weeks, leaving Sarah to face a harsh new reality entirely on her own. Rumors indicate that she found herself displaced, moving between European wellness retreats, while the commercial empire she spent years building completely fell apart. The gamble she made 30 years ago had officially failed. She had sacrificed her independent reputation, her financial stability, and her social standing to guard the secrets of a man who could no longer even protect himself. It was a slow, compounding consequence of a single choice made decades ago. And as she looked out at the ruins of her public life, the most heartbreaking realization of all began to surface. If her fierce dedication to Andrew was the very thing that pushed everyone else away, did her own loyalty cost her everything? Blood ties are supposed to be the ultimate safety net, but in the world of high society, even a mother's love has its limits. When Sarah Ferguson's world completely shattered, the public expected a massive rescue operation from the people closest to her. Reports suggest that everyone assumed her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, would instantly step forward to shield their mother from financial and social ruin. After all, the sisters had spent their entire lives witnessing her fierce protective nature. Yet, as the media storm reached a fever pitch, a devastating reality began to surface. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie were suddenly trapped in a painful, impossible dilemma. While both sisters are independently successful in the private sector, their remaining social status and fragile housing arrangements in places like Kensington Palace depend entirely on staying in the good graces of King Charles III. Insiders say that actively moving to bail out their mother or publicly fighting the palace's decisions could instantly destroy their own standing within the family. It is claimed that a quiet, agonizing distance began to grow, leaving Sarah to navigate the crisis without the public support of her own children. But the limitations of her inner circle didn't stop with her family. For decades, Sarah had cultivated a massive, high-profile network of international celebrities, elite business associates, and wealthy benefactors. Rumors indicate that she believed these powerful connections would provide an immediate fallback plan. But the moment her name became permanently linked to the latest public controversies, those phones stopped ringing entirely. High society friends who once proudly stood by her side at red carpet events suddenly vanished, terrified of the public fallout by association. It leaves us with a chilling realization about the true price of isolation. Every single layer of defense she thought she had was systematically stripped away, leaving her exposed to a cold and unforgiving world. And, as the final doors closed, the true scope of her tragedy became impossible to ignore. How did a woman surrounded by the most powerful people on earth end up facing her darkest hour with absolutely no one left to turn to? The destruction of a public reputation rarely happens in a single moment. Instead, it is a slow, agonizing process of erasure. For Sarah Ferguson, the final collapse of her independent standing was a gradual unwinding that systematically stripped away her entire livelihood. Reports suggest that the true turning point arrived when the commercial foundation she spent decades building out of nothing began to completely fracture from the inside out. Every single independent avenue of income she had relied on was disappearing simultaneously. According to sources, major global publishers and high-profile media networks began quietly halting future projects bearing her name. A highly anticipated children's book project was completely pulled from production and recycled, while multi-million-dollar media proposals in America were abruptly killed off. The message from the corporate world was undeniable. Her brand had become entirely radioactive. Insiders say that she was dropped by a staggering series of charities, including prominent cancer trusts and children's foundations that she had passionately supported for over 30 years. But the commercial fallout was only a symptom of a much deeper isolation. As her professional life evaporated, her social standing in high society circles vanished right along with it. Longtime elite friends and wealthy international benefactors who once eagerly sought her presence began quietly pulling away, terrified of any public association with the unfolding crisis. It is claimed that she essentially became a ghost in the very circles she once dominated, vanishing entirely from the public eye. She found herself checking into remote wellness retreats across Europe, moving quietly from Switzerland to Ireland, completely cut off from the lifestyle she had known for nearly 40 years. The buffer between her past and her present reality had been permanently removed. She was no longer navigating a temporary rough patch. She was experiencing the total deconstruction of her identity as a public figure. Every layer of support, from corporate partnerships to social networks, had been systematically peeled away, leaving her utterly exposed to a cold and unforgiving spotlight. It was the emotional peak of a decades-long struggle, proving that when the palace walls truly close, the outside world becomes a very lonely place. And as she watched the final remnants of her career crumble around her, a much larger, darker reality began to take shape. Was this total professional and social exile simply the natural consequence of the figures she chose to protect? You are about to see exactly how these final pieces connect in a way that no one saw coming. The ultimate tragedy of Sarah Ferguson is that she may have been the architect of her own isolation. For months, the public narrative focused entirely on a cruel family abandonment, framing her as a helpless casualty of cold institutional decisions. But as the dust begins to settle, a far more complicated reality is rising to the surface. Reports suggest that her current situation wasn't a sudden betrayal by the crown, but the completely predictable math of a 40-year cycle of compounding scandals. The victim narrative was completely built on an illusion. When you look closely at the choices she made, a deliberate pattern emerges. Insiders say that Sarah was never truly helpless. Instead, she consistently chose a path of absolute, unwavering loyalty to Prince Andrew, fully aware of the public cost. According to sources, she rejected multiple independent lifelines over the years that would have required her to distance herself from his controversies. She chose to stay, choosing to tether her reputation, her finances, and her public future to a figure who was already completely frozen out by the modern monarchy. But this wasn't just a miscalculation, it was a devastating gamble that finally ran out of time. It is claimed that she genuinely believed her fierce protection of the family's most sensitive secrets would guarantee her permanent immunity from palace eviction. She bet everything on the idea that the institution would always value her silence enough to keep a roof over her head. But under the current leadership of King Charles III, The rules of survival have fundamentally changed, leaving zero room for sentimental debts. The crown didn't actively destroy her lifestyle. It simply stepped out of the way and allowed the natural consequences of decades of public backlash to finally catch up to her. The woman who once stood at the absolute center of royal celebrations is now navigating empty European wellness retreats entirely on her own. She wasn't pushed out by force. She was slowly left behind by a world that moved on without her. It forces us to look past the surface-level drama and confront the most uncomfortable truth of this entire saga. This leaves us with one final haunting realization about the true nature of her ultimate fate. The story of Sarah Ferguson always circles back to the exact same place: the crushing weight of institutional survival. For nearly 40 years, she walked a razor-thin line between the glamorous peak of royal celebrity and the absolute rock bottom of public disgrace. Reports suggest that she spent decades operating under the assumption that her ultimate safety was guaranteed as long as she stayed fiercely loyal to the family's inner circle. But as the modern monarchy draws an uncompromising boundary line between itself and the past, that calculation has officially run out of time. The crown didn't have to rewrite history to change her fate. It simply chose to look the other way. Sarah Ferguson spent decades standing directly beside the royal family through their darkest hours, guarding their deepest secrets and absorbing their public fallout. Yet, when her own world began to collapse so spectacularly, the silence from the palace was deafening. The grand doors were locked, her official titles vanished, and the people she spent a lifetime protecting simply let her drift away into isolation. It leaves us with a profound and haunting lesson about the true price of proximity to the throne. Was she truly abandoned by the institution, or had her own loyalty, compounding choices, and decades of controversy slowly led her to this exact moment all along? The truth is far more complicated than simple abandonment, and we are just beginning to scratch the surface of these hidden royal dynamics. If this deep dive into the real price of royal loyalty kept you guessing, there is so much more of the story to uncover. Hit that subscribe button right now and join our community so you never miss our next unfiltered investigation into the secrets behind the palace walls. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.